Welcome back to Market Overtime. I'm Scott Connor, again filling in for Nicole Petallides. Well, let's continue our conversation about long-term investing. And in order to stay ahead of the curve, investors need to be mindful of their long-term investment strategy, of course. Now, joining me now to discuss this in depth is Arwen Becker, owner of Becker Retirement Group. Arwen, welcome to Market Overtime, and thanks for joining us here on this Thursday. Arwen, let's start with something that has been obviously in the background here a little bit less than we've seen, but it's still there, and that's, of course, volatility in the markets. And we've seen quite a bit about that. Now, what have you been hearing from clients that's worrying them, particularly when it comes to this market volatility?
You know what, Scott, truthfully, the way in which we talk to our clients and we set them up with this long-term mindset, we actually don't get a lot of worried phone calls when it comes to market volatility, because really it comes down to having an established long-term strategy. And actually, Tom, who spoke right before I did, had a lot of those great points that you need to have a plan. And so when you establish a plan clearly from the beginning, when you set the right expectations and volatility does come, it always does. Markets always go through these different gyrations, and sometimes they're worse than others. But when you have a solid plan and you know that those times are going to come, you're not going to be overly worried about it. But that's why it starts with a plan. That's why you have to identify, especially for that long-term strategy. I always say it's like going to the mall. You're not going to go looking for the Sunglass Hut and just wander aimlessly. I kind of think some people do, but it's a really big waste of your time. You're going to go to the directory, you're going to find accessories, you're going to go down to S, find the Sunglass Hut, but then you're going to do one more thing. You're going to find that star, the big circle in the middle that says you are here. For a long-term strategy, you've got to first determine where in the world are you to know then what are going to be the decisions that are going to be made for this long-term plan going forward. And then there's a secondary piece that's really important. And actually, a friend of mine and mentor, David Bach, has always said, when your values are established and clear, making financial decisions becomes easier. So for a lot of people, they've really got to get established as to what matters to me before I start making a lot of financial decisions for my long-term investment strategy.
Got it. Now, it's interesting that you mentioned that, having the plan. That seems to be obviously the theme of today's session. But you did just mention, that it's important for investors to identify their values before making those kinds of money decisions. Can you expand just a little bit on that?
Yeah, and this is especially for couples. I mean, it goes for singles as well. But when you first identify when you have money, what does it mean to you? So for women, a lot of times, because I speak predominantly to women investors, that's security, that's having flexibility, that's having control, not being a burden on their children. So if those are the values, but maybe you and your spouse haven't had this conversation clearly, and maybe he's going out and spending a lot on a couple of jet skis and things to tow him and takes out loans for it, but it threatens her feeling of financial security, now you have a misalignment of values. And then, of course, that can lead to a lot of harder problems down the road for people financially. So getting people on the same page saying, what does money mean to me? What does it mean to you? And then how do you combine the two of those? And then it allows you to make better financial decisions, because you'll say, does this align with my value that I have for money? No, I don't think it does. So we're not going to buy that and possibly threaten our future financial security just because it seems cool and sexy at that moment to, get a jet ski or go on that trip or just some of the impulse things that we often do. I mean, we all have things that we like to buy, but sometimes we need to know, does that really align with my values?
Got it. Good takeaway. Arwen, we just have 30 seconds left, but I wanted to just ask you quickly the significance, and maybe you can touch on this, of tax planning in this whole overview.
Yeah, very important. A lot of people separate that from their financial planning. We combine those. We have a CPA on full-time staff for this exact reason, because when you give one extra money to taxes, it's $1 less that's going into your financial security. So making sure you have the understanding of how your investments, what their tax strategies are, and if you don't have that, making sure you're linking those two pieces, because one extra dollar that can stay in your finances is going to be one extra dollar you're going to have in retirement that's going to grow into a lot more.
Okay, makes sense. But again, thank you. Those were some great takeaways, I think, for our long-term investors. It was a pleasure having you. Look forward to seeing you again on Market Overtime. Thanks again. That was Arwen Beck, owner of Becker Retirement Group. All right, take care.